Hello, and welcome to the AFP webinar, Launching a Gifts in Wills program. Thank you for joining us. My name is Megan, and I will be the operator for the presentation today. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acquaint you with a few features of this web event technology. At any time, you may adjust your audio using any computer volume settings that you may have. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a text chat window. This is a place where you will be able to add comments and questions throughout the event. And your questions will be responded to in which the order they were received and will be addressed at the end of the presentation. At the conclusion of today's program, we ask that you complete a brief post-event survey. Please take a moment to complete this survey as it will help AFP plan future web events. Today's presenter, Ligia Pena, is the Global Legacy Manager at Greenpeace International since March 2016. For the past 15 years, she has been working with a wide range of organizations ranging from mental health, environmental education, at-risk youths to international NGOs. Working on all aspects of fundraising, communications, and management, her true passion has always been to empower small nonprofits to be strong, resilient, and sustainable so they may realize their important mission. In recent years, Ligia has been presenting on the topic of planned giving for small shops, ethics in fundraising, and social media. She is the author of Small Shop Fundraising chapter in the second volume of Excellence in Fundraising in Canada, as well as several other articles in various electronic and print publications. Ligia is very active in the Canadian nonprofit sector. Until April 2016, she was a co-chair of the Board of Directors of Girls Action Foundation. She serves on several committees at AFP International and has served 5 years on the Quebec chapter of the AFP. She is a member in good standing of the AFP and the CAGP ACPDP. And now we'll turn it over to you, Ligia.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Megan, for the introduction. That is a very long bio. We need to cut that down. So welcome everybody. I'm very happy to be here today and to talk to you about launching a legacy program. And I'm very excited to read everyone's comments saying where they're from, what they hope to get from this webinar, and just a variety of types of organization. It's really exciting. So today, it's all about how to start a program, a Gift in Wills program. I need to preface this with one thing. I used to say plan giving when I used to work in Canadian organizations, and ever since I've gone to a global organization, we refer to it as legacies. So for the sake of clarity, and so that we all understand we're talking about the exact same thing, it is plan giving. I just like to be more specific in saying Gifts in Wills, Bequest. So just to make it simple, I'll probably most likely use legacies because that's what I've been conditioned to say now since I've been at Greenpeace. So I am trying to move forward. So now the slides are not moving forward, Megan. Here we go. All right, here we go. So that's me. So like Megan was saying, I'm the Global Legacy Manager at Greenpeace International. I've been there now. It's going to be 3 years in 1 week. I'm also I also have a cute little blog called Globetrotting Fundraiser. You'll see the link there on the first slide. I've recently just started blogging again, and it's mostly about legacy giving, gifts and wills. And also when I hit the road, I'd like to talk also about what I'm learning in different markets. So I know a lot of my bio referred to being a small shop fundraiser. And yes, most of my career has been in small and medium-sized organizations. And so now what I'm doing is applying some of the learnings of working in a big global organization and adapting them to small shops. This is not to say that what I will be covering today is strictly for small shops, but what I do like to do is adapt some of the information so that it takes in consideration the different realities of different organizations. So how I will be taking questions as I go along. So if you have any questions, you want me to repeat something is not clear, please put it in the chat box, questions or comments, And I will do my best to stop at every couple of slides to do a little bit of a check-in with you to make sure that I answer your questions. Because I know that hanging on to your questions until the end of the webinar is very difficult. We tend to forget, and then we forget the context and everything. And I want you to get the most out of this webinar. We only have 1 hour, so let's get to it. So our learning outcomes for this webinar is learning the fundamentals, okay? I want to be very clear, in a webinar, it's really, really hard to go really deep into a topic and come out of there saying, I have exactly the perfect plan to start a gift and will program in my organization. So I want to be very realistic. It will be a roadmap to help you build a case for investment in a Bequest program. You know, the fundamentals of how to set up your program, how to build a strong and progressively moving pipeline. And then, of course, I kept a few minutes at the end to quickly talk about setting and reporting on KPIs, so key performance indicators, okay? But the bulk of the conversation will be about, getting you off the ground. So, but first and foremost, it's important to address some of the common myths about legacy giving, plan giving, gifts and wills. And the biggest misconception, and the reason why I'm starting with this, is that you will have to build a case in your organization in order to get senior management and the board on board, air quotes, to invest in a Bequest program. And to do that, we need to dismiss all of the myths surrounding plan giving. And the first one that I've encountered has been that bequest gifts and wills are difficult. And I'm going to tie that in with the second myth, is that you need to be an expert, either a lawyer or a financial planner or an insurance specialist. And nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, my experience has been that gifts and wills, so bequests, are incredibly simple. Yes, it's not denying the fact that sometimes you have some cases that can be quite challenging, but that's in 17 years of working as a professional fundraising, it has been the anomaly, not a common thread. So basically, it's the most common way that people give through plan gifts. There's a reason why more than 85% of plan gifts come in as gifts and wills. And you don't need to be an expert. I think this is where the argument that I often give to boards and senior management is, that's why it's important to have a lawyer on your board, or have a side plan giving advisory committee that can be your experts to support you and to provide you with advice when such cases arise, when you do get a bequest that is a little bit more complex. So there's no need to go and have to hire a lawyer to be your plan giving professional. In fact, for most organizations, it's just not financially feasible. And it's not because someone is a lawyer that it makes them necessarily a defective fundraiser. So let's be real about these kinds of things. Another myth is that all bequests will be realized decades later. And while it can be true, the common analogy that is used in plan giving is that it can take from 5 to 10 years to see a return on your investment. Yes, that is the common knowledge about this. However, depending on your data file, so depending on the demographics of your donors, it is quite possible that by setting up a legacy program today, that you could see a return on your investment quite quickly. A very quick example would be in July of 2016, I was asked by Greenpeace Japan to come and train their new high-value fundraiser and to help them set up a legacy program. 2 years later, they had over 100 people in their pipeline, and they already had 2 gifts come in. Granted, they weren't very, very big gifts, and plan giving in Japan is underdeveloped. However, it demonstrated that within 2 years and with very little investment, they actually barely invested any money at all because they just didn't have the money, but they were able to get legacy gifts right away within 2 years. So if you do some data mining in your database and you see you've got a lot of people who are over the age of 65, you're ready. It's time to do this. You don't waste another day. Another common myth is that good marketing focuses on organizational needs. Well, I mean, we don't need to be talking about, donor-centered communications anymore, do we? I mean, it should be the common way to market your programs and your impact. So focusing on how the donor is the hero in the story of your organization always will be the sure way to be successful in your fundraising. Another common myth is that bequest marketing should be passive, that all you need to do is just put it out there and that's it. That notion of, if you build it, they will come. Well, no, bequest fundraising is just as strategic, proactive as major gifts, as, acquisition and conversion. It still requires a strategy of identifying who your prospects are, being very thoughtful, methodical, and strategic in the way you communicate with them, and actually rank your prospects so that you can go and actually solicit them. And so it does require more than just putting the occasional blurb in your newsletter or, occasional tick-off box in your buck slip. So it does require attention if you really want it, if you're serious about growing it strategically. And the last common myth is that bequests are just for the wealthy. So something I've heard countless times from senior management and the board is, oh, well, we don't have anyone wealthy in our database. So what's the point? Well, we all have assets, and a gift in the will is not based on today's wealth. It's based on assets. So someone can live a very frugal life but have amassed important amounts of assets, and all of those assets are deemed liquidated when they die. Therefore, usually we tend to underestimate how much our net worth really is. We often hear these stories, but it's happened to me. I had with one of the organizations I used to work with many years ago, where there was a donor who had left 100% of her estate to the organization. And for all intents and purposes, she did not look like she was, your typical prospect. She had made 2 or 3 $25 donations to the organization, had never married, had no children. And when she passed away, her bequest her assets totaled, after paying off all debts and everything, it was $592,000. That is a lot of money. That would not have been the kind of gift that she would have been able to make in her lifetime. And it probably would have been very difficult for that organization at that point in time to be able to get a traditional major gift of that amount. And so we need to look beyond the wealth screening. And in addition to that, just a commentary on that is that legacy giving is perhaps the most democratic form of fundraising there could be, because it is for absolutely everybody and anybody. And so that's why, for me, is one of the reasons why I love it so much. So why should we care? And I know that many of you have heard this, and the numbers that get tossed around, they vary. But, it has been reported time and time again that we are in the midst of the greatest wealth transfer of any generation to date. It has been evaluated at approximately $16 trillion in wealth transfer. So imagine just receiving 1.1% of that. That's a pretty big piece of the pie, don't you think? So that's why it's so important to get going. So what do we need to do? So obviously we need to stop spinning our wheels, stop talking about acquisition, or retention, which are both absolutely important. But we need to start looking at our data file from a longevity perspective and look at everyone that we acquire today as being a potential bequest donor in 10, 15, 25 years' time, and develop the strategies that makes it so that we retain them, we engage them continually, so that we can get to that legacy gift eventually. So that's the long-term vision. We need to invest the limited resources, because I don't know any organization that says, oh, no problem, sky's the limit in terms of our human and financial resources. We can do this. We do have limited resources, so we need to be very thoughtful in developing the right engagement strategies that will give us the greatest rate of return. Okay. And, when it comes to legacy giving, it really is about the long-term supporter journey. So we need to think creatively. And I'm talking about looking at not only examples within the nonprofit sector, but outside of the nonprofit sector, and look at how can we be creative in giving our donors an opportunity to realize their philanthropic dreams. So making those connections with those human and values connection between our organization and the donors. And of course, training and support. And you're an example of that. You've decided to invest in your professional development to join this webinar. So awesome. So I'm going to stop here briefly, do a little check-in to see if there's any questions, anything that's not clear. So I want to give you a minute to quickly type in the chat box. See if you've got any questions, or anything that you've encountered that has been difficult for you to engage your board or your senior management in having this conversation about investing in a legacy program. So I'm not seeing anyone typing, so I'll keep moving ahead, and I'll check back in again in a few minutes. So building your case. Of course, if you've done a little bit of research, you come out of this webinar and you go, okay, great, more than ever, we need to do this. There's no other reason why we shouldn't do this. So you need to start building your case, and it takes time. If the situation in your organization is as such that everyone is on board for this, fantastic. So start thinking about it strategically. If you need to convince your board and your senior management, this is the section that's going to be the most important. So first and foremost, what I've experienced in all of my nonprofit experience, and I suspect you've probably encountered this as well, is you need to find an ally, whether it's in your senior management team. For me, it's often been the finance director, because of course, when you come to them and you say, hey, I can find new money for us, well, I can find us a new fundraising channel, that will make them perk up, their ears will perk up right away. Find that person on your board who will understand the value of this. I just saw a question from Janet that's asking if the slide decks will be available. They are currently available. There is a box that says File for Download, and it says the name of the Launching Your Gifts and Will program. That's my slide deck. You can download it right there. You're welcome. So start with finding your ally. Have that conversation with them. Explain to them what's happening. So if you want to, you can even use these slides. Go for it. These are not copyrighted. And then what I would strongly suggest, if you're building your case and you're going to be doing a presentation to senior management or your board, is to do a country or a community profile. So, of course, take what you need as what is applicable for your organization. So if your organization is working at a state level, at a provincial level, do a profile for the province. If you're working at a federal, like a national level, do that. If you're only working in a small community, keep it to that small community. So you need to adapt based on your own reality. So do a breakdown of the population, males and females. Why? Because studies have demonstrated that women give more legacy gifts than males do. Is this to say that you're not going to approach your male donors? No, of course not. But if you've got if there are more women in your population and in your database, you already have a leg up right there and then. So that's just something to consider. The other thing is the average life expectancy. So this is where you're looking at actuarial tables, and you want to see, how long people live in your community, in your province, or in your state, or in your country in particular. And so that allows you to then do projections. Once you're rolling your program, you can start doing lifetime expectancy projections of when a gift could be coming in. This is way more advanced, and I'll make a little comment about that later in the session. Education level. So what is the education level in your community? Is it mostly high school, university graduates, postgraduate? Why? Because, and we know the case is true for all fundraising, the higher the level of education, the higher propensity to make a gift. So this is an important consideration. Ownership of assets, is there a high proportion of people who own properties, who own financial assets, etc. The percentage of adult population with a will. So this is also really interesting. In the U.S., you've got your Plan Giving Association. In Canada, we have Canadian Association of Gift Planners. You can, and even, with the statistics in your country, you can also find out what is the proportion of people writing wills. And so that will give you an indication of what your potential is. You can also look at Leave a Legacy. They usually have that kind of information. So, rely on those kinds of resources in order to get that data. The percentage of charitable donation per GDP. So I believe that AFP can provide that, and there are some studies that provide this information. The percentage of population that donated in the last 12 months, 12 months. And this as well can be found from your government statistics, because what that does, it gives you an indication of how philanthropic that community is. And so that will help a lot towards your marketing approach to your legacy program. And the average donor contribution, the number of registered charities. So you want to gauge how many in your community, how many charities there are. And even yet, you can even take it one step further, is how many of those registered charities or actually are running legacy programs. So you want to gauge your competition. And this kind of insights will really help you develop your strategy, your messaging, etc., as to what would be appropriate in your market. And then, so that's the external look. So you want to have that external analysis to have a lay of the land. And then this is when you go more inward. So the other layer is looking at your own organization's potential through your own data mining. So all the information, a lot of the information you need in order to start building your case already resides in your database. So looking at age groups, how many years people on average donate. So what is the donation life expectancy, not the actual life expectancy that I was referring to before. So how long are you able to retain your donors? Years lapse, how many years have people been lapsed for in your data file? And other supportive behaviors such as, do you get people to sign petitions? Do they attend events? That kind of insight, because the more audience insights you have, the more you have, a lot of the donor behavior will give you the strategies that you should be using, and in order to have a successful program. So I know I just threw a lot of information at you, so I want to check in to see if there's any questions, any insights that you think you would want to have in order to build your case, or anything else. So just give you a quick second to type it in. And I see someone typing, so I'll give you a second there. So, question here, you mentioned some of this information can be found through your government statistics. Where would we locate those? Well, depending on you know, where you are, if you're looking at it from, you know, either a provincial or state government or federal. So whichever agency takes care of statistics, I can only speak to you in terms of, you know, in Canada, it would be Statistics Canada that can provide some of that information. But then there are also some foundations and some agencies that do a lot of that interpretation of statistics. So you could look at that. You can also, you know, I know that AFP also publishes a lot of these kinds of studies. So you have to look at the different sources where you can get that information depending on you know, your particular case in terms of, you know, you can also look at it through the lens of if you're a social services organization. Well, a lot of social services associations will also provide that kind of information. So it's hard for me to say exactly where you will find it because it depends on your particular case, but you have to look at it through, you know, go look at, you know, if the government provides that kind of statistics, or if umbrella associations of, you know, specific to your type of organization will provide that information, and so on. Erin is asking me if I'm using a wealth finding software. No, I've never used that. Well, for one, when I used to work in Canadian organization, we don't have that because we've got very strict privacy laws. So you guys have access to a lot of information in the U.S. It's both exciting and also very scary from a Canadian perspective. From an international perspective, working at Greenpeace, most offices we do not. Because as I was saying before, wealth is not necessarily an indicator of, you know, having that potential for a legacy. It's not to say that, you know, someone wealthy will not give a legacy, but it's not the number one reason. And because it's based on assets, not necessarily on today's wealth. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a big difference between being cash poor and asset rich and vice versa. So I've never used that. And also, if we look a little bit, if you look at the research being done as to what makes a donor leave a gift in their will to an organization, it's not based on their wealth. It's based on their connection to the cause and how you're able to engage with them at an emotional level, much like with a lot of the fundraising. But I'm talking more about like helping the donor go through their autobiographical memory. And this is all the research that's presented by Dr. Russell James in the U.S. And so I would strongly encourage you to read his research, and you will see that basically he distills all of that that notion that it's based on wealth and so on. So Dina is asking if I'll explain how other supportive behavior influences your case. Well, in this case, it's not. What I'm referring to is about having the basic information for you to build a case, to make your case to senior management about how much potential your organization has. So what you're trying to do at this stage is just demonstrate the potential, and that's as far as you want to go. Based on all of that other insights that you're getting, then you can I think what you're trying to get at is how you build the case to engage donors into leaving a legacy. And that's a completely different situation. It's a different topic. Right now we're talking about convincing the decision makers in your organization that there is a potential for legacies in your organization and that they will invest in the program. So now You've made your case. Your board and senior management have given you what you needed in order to start your legacy program. How do you start? This is probably the most daunting part of the process, because starting from scratch can be really overwhelming. And if there's one thing I would say as like the number one thing you could do to help yourself in this process would be to connect with other people who have started legacy programs, who are running a program that you admire. So I would encourage you to do your research to see other organizations that are similar, perhaps like, if you're an environmental organization, look at other environmental organizations' legacy program, but also look at other programs in other types of organizations, perhaps organizations that have similar challenges as you do, so that you can see and learn from their experience. My experience throughout my entire career has been that when you come and approach someone else, a counterpart, a colleague in another organization, they're very open to sharing and being very collegiate. So, find a mentor if needs be. So I mentioned earlier about finding a champion on your board. Well, allow that person to continue being that champion for your legacy program, and perhaps even be part of, head the plan giving advisory committee, and give them a specific role that they can then be the bridge between you and the board and senior management in talking about the legacy program. I was talking about finding a mentor, finding allied professionals. There's a lot of people on this call. Everybody's probably having the same kind of challenges and discussions in your organization. I see there's 53 attendees in this call. You've got a base of you've got your village, your plan giving village is right here in this call. So everyone can support one another in developing the program wherever you are in the stage of your implementation process. And then the next thing is starting to create marketing materials and sample the Bequest language. So there are, there's a lot of organizations that already have established programs, and you need to do your research to see, well, what looks good, what doesn't look good. Read the research that is being put out there about legacy marketing, and I'm happy to share some of them at the end of this session. A lot of stuff coming out of Europe, which is absolutely brilliant and really, really challenges the way we've been doing plan giving in North America. So I could talk about that a little bit later. And then the next best thing, start segmenting. So you need to be really strategic. We don't have all day to do everything, and we can't be everything to everybody. So you need to be really strategic in the way you're going to start communicating legacies to your supporters. So this is where the really, really good stuff starts. And as a data geek, this is where I get really excited. So segmenting your database. You want to be strategic in the way you approach this, because you're not going to want to be giving the same message to everybody. The way you would communicate to someone that's over 75 will be different than the way you communicate to someone that's 55. So you need to be thoughtful in that way. So this is how I would start. And again, this is just an idea for you to get a sense of how to segment. You need to adapt this based on your own reality, okay? So, go in there, go with me on this and see how you can adapt these segments to your reality. So first off, look at the length of support from all your active donors. So a word about active. Everybody has a different definition, and depending on your fundraising channels, you might have a different definition. People in digital will say someone's active if they've been giving for 3 months, whereas other channels will say, well, they have to be giving for 6 months or 1 year. The definition I use right now, the one that we're using at Greenpeace in all of our offices, is for legacy purposes, is an active donor that's been giving for the previous fiscal year to date. So it is February 27th today. For us in the legacy community, an active donor is someone who has made a financial contribution from January 1st, 2018 to February 27th, 2019. So one previous fiscal year and year to date. So if you were going to use that definition for length of support, you would do, like I would start with 4 segments, the first batch of segmentation. So looking at the length of support, 25 years and more, 15 to 25, 5 to 15, up to 55. So now you've got 4 lists all set up, right? And then I would do another set of segmentation, and that's by age. So looking at everybody that's over the age of 75. And that might be a very small list, or maybe long, depending on your organization. Then another list, 65 to 75, then 55 to 65, and 45 to 55. So now you've got 4 lists under the age category and 4 lists between under the length of support category. So then the good stuff starts. This is when I start mix matching. So if I've got very limited time and I don't have access to a lot of resources in my organization, I will want to focus first on those donors that are over the age of 75 and who have been supporting my organization for 25 years or more. So I will take that list of the 75 list and the 25 list. I'll merge them together. I'll dedupe them. Now I've got my clean list, and I will develop a strategy for that group. Then I'll take 75 years of age who have been supporting the organization from 15 to 25 years. Again, dedupe again. And then I have my clean list. That's my second segment. And go on like that. You understand what I'm saying? So you want to start with the oldest age supporting longer. And then you go lower. And then once you've done all the 75 years and older, then you do the 65 to 75 years, supporting 25 years or more, dedupe, final list. So now, in the end, you would have all these different lists that have been cleaned out. You want to make sure that one person does not show up in 2 lists, because then you're not going to have the right strategy and you're going to look bad. And now that you see who these people are, then I would do some research. So odds are you probably won't have hundreds and hundreds of people in your 75 years old and older supporting for 25 years or more. You probably will have, I'll say whatever number, 25 people. It's very easy to develop a very highly personalized, very high touch approach to this. So I'm going to stop here because I've been talking a lot, and I want to check in to see, does this segmentation section make sense? Does it look like something you could do clearly in your organization? Yes, awesome, good. That's what I like to hear. Because I want you to leave with something very concrete that you can bring to your desk and go, okay, I'm going to start segmenting. I'm going to geek out on data. Awesome. I'm getting a few yeses. That's very encouraging. So now having this kind of information is power, because now your program is starting to have a face to it. There are humans in there that have the potential and could be really interested in this. Let me see, there's a few more comments that are coming in. Excellent. So I'm going to continue. I'm monitoring the chat box as well to see if there's any questions, so please continue. Oh, we don't have ages for most of our donors. And that's often, that's the number one question I get. We don't have ages. You need to have that conversation in your organization to see how you can start capturing age. So if say, for instance, on your website, you have a newsletter sign up, or, you have an online donation sign up, ask the question. You don't have to have their full year. Ask for the month and the year. That's it. You don't need to have the date. That's all you need to do. Try doing that. And what you can do then, if you don't have the age, looking at the length of support is also an indicator that perhaps someone's been is older. Because if someone's been supporting you for 25 years or more, well, they're over the age of 45 or 50. It's not an accurate indication, but it's a little bit more information than having no information at all, right? But there's another way that you can start populating the date of birth or the age that I'm going to get to shortly. But first, I'm going to make sure I read all the questions. Oh, okay. Well, someone was asking me about strategies to get the donor's age. So yeah, like your newsletter sign up, your online donation form. You can ask even just the year, because the year is not invasive. It's not very specific. And you can, and I know that there's a lot more concern now with privacy and so on, but you can just say it's just for statistical, I can't say that word now, statistical purposes, but also so that you can you can say, we want to tailor our communications to you so that you get exactly what you need from us, and getting your age is part of it. And, you're never going to be able to get all of them, but the more information you can get, the better it is. So how does a strategy differ from a 45-year-old compared to a 75-year-old? That is a really good question. So here's the thing. Although there are more and more older population on social media, on digital, odds are someone that's over the age of 75 will most likely prefer a written approach as opposed to a digital approach. And so if you're starting to target a younger population of 45 to 55-year-old, I would say your best bet is to start focusing more on your digital marketing approach to legacies than on a mailing approach. So that's how it would differ. So if I've got a lot of people who are over the age of 65, 75 years old, I would prioritize writing strong letters, personal visits, and so on. Whereas if I see that there's a lot of potential in my 45 to 55-year-old segment, I will include a digital element in my strategy. Does that make sense, Ron? So I know that traditionally, especially in North America, although it's starting to change, traditionally we always do client giving marketing, the traditional, direct mail approach, and so on. I haven't seen an awful lot of testing in digital. There is some happening, but it hasn't become the norm. But in Europe, that is the norm. And so that's the bit that's really interesting. We need to start looking at doing a bit more digital and doing that testing. It's really quite interesting. I actually wrote a blog about it on Tuesday that you can see on my blog, Globetrotting Fundraiser. So moving on from segmenting. So then what I would do, this is the pipeline. But before I go into the pipeline, now that I've got my segments, what are you going to do? You don't have any information on these people, so you don't know where you would want to put them in your pipeline. So what I would do is a survey. So you can develop, and this is coming back to your question, Ron, I would do a survey that would be very personalized. And so to someone who's over the age of 75, I would write a longer letter with big, bold, like bigger fonts, because we know that most of the time eyesight is a bit of a challenge. So a quick word on marketing, never, ever, ever, ever write white text against a color background. It is very difficult for our older population donors. And while I'm not in that age bracket, I'm not quite 50 yet, but I wear glasses and I have difficulty seeing, white text, printed white text against a color. So please don't ever do that. So I would send out a survey, a simple survey, and I can, if you're interested, I can send you samples of surveys that have been done, and usually they're just no more than 10 questions. The first 2 questions usually are very simple, easy questions. They're like introductory questions that are kind of what I call the throwaway questions that are about, how long they've been giving to the organization and so on. And then it starts building on the questions about gifts and wills. So question 3 and 4 usually are more in the general. Did you know that, X number of people in this province or this state make gifts and wills, of course, you need to get that information. Were you aware of this? And then there's always that one question in you're getting the donor to start thinking in that way of, oh, is this, yes, I'd like to do, yes, this fine. This sounds like a really interesting way to support my favorite charity. And yes, this is something I would consider. And then there's always that one question where it goes, in thinking about leaving a gift in your will to organization XYZ, so the name of your organization, which of these options represents where you stand? And so there's specific answers, and depending on their answer, it informs you if they are an inquirer. So basically, I don't know, I never thought about it, but I would like to have information. So if they tick that off, you flag them as an inquirer. If they say, I have heard of this and I am considering leaving a gift in my will to XYZ organization, they are intenders. Or if one of the options is, I have heard of this and I have put organization XYZ in my will, they are a pledger. So they are basically self-identifying to you where they are in your pipeline. So they send this survey back. And what will that survey include? Also demographic information such as month and year of birth. Are they widowed? Do they have grandchildren? Do they have children and do they have grandchildren? And how do they like to be communicated? So you're trying to get these additional information. And so you could send this survey to your different segments that you did before and wait for their response, and then you plot them in your pipeline. So these are the 3 stages of the pipeline. This is very simplified. We have a 6-stage pipeline at Greenpeace. It used to be 10. I reduced it to 6. But for the simplicity of this webinar and to make your life easier, I simplified it to inquirers. So inquirers are people who are just learning about giving a gift in the will and are inquiring about getting more information. So this is where you're, a nice legacy brochure talking about what your organization does, what your impact is, and what you intend to do in the next, in the future, and how they can contribute to that vision through a gift in the will. So you're basically starting to build trust. That's the key message in that document. The intenders are basically, they're considering it, they're thinking about it, they're having that conversation with their advisors, with their family. So this is where you're providing them with more information, such as the way that they can give a gift, how they can structure their gift. You would give them sample bequest language, making sure that they have the right name of your organization, the right address, because you don't want them you don't want them to have to guess that. The lawyer or the notary will not figure it out. And the last thing you know is someone writing the name of your organization wrong, and then it has to go to probate, and then it's a complete disaster. You don't want that. You can even develop a guide to will preparation. That's exactly what I'm working on today. So developing a guide that is a free document that they can then complete, and that helps them prepare for their meeting with their lawyer or their notary to write the will. Or if they self-identified as being pledgers, which is basically, I have already pledged, I've put you in my will, and I've pledged to give a gift in my will to you, then they are pledgers. So now you've got your pipeline. You've got people populated in your pipeline. So you do that with all of your segments, and then what your strategy will then be to figure out, based on your reality in your organization and the different channels that you have, your social media, your direct mail, your newsletter, etc., all of the tools that you have at your disposal, how you will continue engaging and building trust with your supporters, with your donors, to move through this pipeline in order to get the pledgers. And then you also develop a plan on how to keep communicating with your pledgers so that they don't change their mind, because what happens sometimes is that it's that set it and forget it mentality that you sometimes encounter with monthly gifts, is that you build everything to get the gift, but then you don't do anything to keep the gift. And we all know that wills can be changed very, very easily. And so you want to develop a plan, a stewardship plan, for when the pledge is confirmed. So I'm going to stop. I know we've got 9 minutes left, so I want to check the questions that have come in. Let me just scroll back. Again, survey being very, thank you. And the survey, again, like to go back to what was being said before, the survey you can send by mail, but if you're surveying a younger population, let's say those under the age of 65, you might want to do it online as well. So this is why like having those age segments is helpful. If you don't have it, do both. You know, with SurveyMonkey, it's cheap, it's free, depending on the case. So, okay, I see here Kevin has a multi-part question. We have several people who reach out for our EIN because they're including us in their will, but they get squirrely when I try to, for example, interview them to highlight their story of making a planned gift. That is normal. A lot of people are uncomfortable sharing their story. Do you have any good disclosure form that you would like to, oh, sorry, I'm trying to scroll properly and I'm missing some lines. Good disclosure form. I can't, it's not allowing me to scroll. So people can self-identify that they have a planned gift and we can follow up. Yes. So there's a document that I created, and honestly, like, you know, learning from other people who've been doing this longer than you did and have been in the sector longer than you have is always good. There was an example that I used from an organization I worked with many, many years ago, and my predecessor there had developed a gift commitment form, and it was really great. It looked somewhat like a major gift commitment form, but it basically was non-invasive, and I'm happy to share the one that I used that to develop that for Greenpeace. And basically, we just we invite donors to complete this form, and it basically says, you're not obliged to do this, but this gives us an opportunity to make sure that we respect your wishes. And so we give them the opportunity to, designate it to a campaign in particular, but, you know, keeping in mind that there could be changes along the way. We also try to make sure to know who their next, who will be their executor, so that and we also ask them, like, is there anybody you want us to thank or recognize when the gift comes in? So at least we can, be thoughtful in that way. And then what we do is we also give them an opportunity to write in this form a testimonial, or what we're doing is actually the way we're putting it is also saying, what would be your message to the next generation? Because we're talking about environment at Greenpeace. So what message would you like the next generation to hear from you? And so the donor is able to then pass that message along in that time, and we do put in there in a disclosure that we could be using it for marketing purposes. And so it's a very non-invasive way for them to have their voice heard without necessarily having to meet with you in that way. Because sometimes, my experience has been is that they're very humble people. People who leave a gift in their will are very humble, and they don't want all the hoopla around it. So the second part of the question, is there any data on people who disclose to leave a gift in the will and then rewrite their will down the road? It does happen. I haven't been able to find any data because, unfortunately, I'll be really honest, there is a lack of research being done. And I mean, there is a research in terms of like academic research about behavior and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of reporting and all that, and like behavior change in terms of people saying that they will leave a gift and then they don't, there hasn't been a lot of research in that. So unfortunately, I don't have any like hard data in there. Can you talk about what you ask donors to complete in order to count them in as a planned giving society? So that document I just referred to, Christine, would be that. So planned giving societies, there's a lot of going back and forth from what I've seen. Some people love them, some people don't. I'm not particularly a huge fan of planned giving societies, but I recognize that in some organizations and in some communities, it is incredibly important. And so I would say, if that is something that is important in among your donors, always feel out your donors. Do what they tell you. If they say they don't care about it, then don't do it. But if there's something that they care about, be very thoughtful. Ask them, donors love to be asked their opinion. Ask them what kind of recognition would bring value to you that would make you feel good, and then build your program accordingly. Build your Plan Giving Society accordingly. There are some plan giving brochures I could share. There are a lot out there that if you do some search on some organizations, some of them even put them on their website. But yeah, definitely, I will put my contact information, my email, and then I'm happy to send you what I've got. Do you have any written information you can share on how to identify where your donor is in the pipeline and what resources might be useful for them? I do, actually. I'm happy to share with you the 6-stage pipeline, and in there it's a full Excel spreadsheet basically saying what feelings we want them to do, what action we want them to take, what tools could be used at every stage of the pipeline. So it basically is a strategy paper, really. So I'm happy to share that as well. If you send me an email, I will share that. I'm an open book when it comes to tools and resources, because the more tools we share, the better we are at doing our job. So we only have 3 minutes left, and I want to make sure I get to the last slide, which is about KPIs. And I know that it's not part of this conversation, but I wanted to throw it in there because we're not talking enough about good KPIs for legacies, for plan giving, So, you can't evaluate a gift and will program the way you would evaluate a DM program or a digital program or even a major gift program. Unfortunately, there's still that tendency to always look at the revenue generated. And although that is obviously important, it is not the key KPI you should be focusing on, especially as you're starting out. I want you to focus on your acquisition rate. How many people are you bringing into your pipeline? And of course, it'll be difficult the first few years because if you're starting from scratch, you don't have a baseline. So look at how you're doing in the first 2 years. Let that be your baseline. And then every year, give yourself a challenging goal to increase your acquisition rate. Then look at your movement through the pipeline. So if you decide to do the 3-stage pipeline that I just shared, awesome. If you decide to implement a 5 or 6 or 10-stage pipeline, look at your movement. How are you moving people from one stage to the next? How are you converting? How are you getting people to say, I'm considering to I'm a pledger now? Calculate your conversion rate. Focus on those. Make sure that when you talk about your legacy program to your senior management and to your board, it talks about acquisition, conversion. That has to be the conversation. It cannot be on how much money it comes in. That should not be what drives the conversation. It should be about the other KPIs. And as you build, monitor everything, adjust based on your learnings, and listen to your donors. So, I could do 2 hours on KPIs just for that because we just did a big 2-year project on that, and I think we've got perhaps like the most elaborate KPIs and definitions that I've encountered with other INGOs. So I'm happy to talk to you about that too. I feel like I'm really rushing for the last minute. But yes, I am willing to share everything and anything I have. I'm going to put in the chat box my Greenpeace email, greenpeace.org. So that is my email at Greenpeace. You can also follow my my blog. I'm not even spelling properly. .com, globetrottingfundraiser.com. That is my blog, and so I write I write every Tuesdays, and then I do a Q&A on Thursday. So if people send me questions on Tuesday and Wednesday, I respond to their questions on Thursdays. I'm happy to share whatever I've got, and if you want to talk more one-on-one about your Gift and Will program, you can contact me, and then we can set up a time to chat and take it from there. I'm willing to stay a few more minutes to answer more questions if you want. If you have to run, I completely understand. Thank you for joining this webinar. This was a lot of fun, and thank you for your active participation. I hope you enjoyed the webinar and take a couple of minutes to complete the evaluation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time, and Lizia, for your wonderful information. This concludes today's webinar. Please take a moment to complete our survey, which helps us plan future program events. And upon completion of the survey, you'll be able to download and print your certificate. For a complete list of upcoming webinars, please visit www.afpglobal.org/webinars. This concludes today's program. Thank you, and have a great day.